Hear me okay? It's always a balance between what's happening in this room. No, you're saying no in the back. David, he's saying no behind you. Arthur. All right, well, if they can hear me on YouTube. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We're going to just get started because I didn't realize how late it was, but I do want to introduce our readers. Ruth Kadish, Jean Clarich, Beth DeZoden Fuchs. Where's Beth and Natan? They're not here. Okay, I'll read them. And Bev Shapiro and Lonnie Fleischer. And to light candles in just a moment, the Liebermans. But we'll start with the ad. This is going to be like a regular thing. It's going to be the regular thing. Our service tonight is brought to you by the Congregation for Humanistic Judaism Member Retreat, May 2nd through 4th, the Cincinnati, Ohio Summit Hotel. Get to know each other, visit iconic sites of American Jewish history, gather socially, enjoy great meals and conversations, and share with Cincinnati's humanistic Jews. Next slide, please. It's a convenient drive down I-75. It takes 4 hours and 7 minutes exactly. Next slide, please. You'll enjoy a day of discussion and Shabbat and glowing and Havdalah things and a special tour of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, ordination site of Rabbi Sherwin Wein, founder of the Movement for Humanistic Judaism, and yours truly. We'll visit the rare book, and that shtick has got to stop now. The rare book and manuscript library there, the Skirball Museum, the American Jewish Archives. Plans might change a little bit, but the weekend looks like it will happen. We're talking about some possibilities, but this is as it is right now, and in no case will it be anything less than this, and maybe even more fun. I'm just saying stuff now. All right, let's start Shabbat. This is the promise of Shabbat. After noise, we seek quiet. After crowds of indifferent strangers, we seek to touch those we love. After concentration on work or responsibility, we seek freedom to meditate, listening to our inward selves. We open our eyes to the hidden beauties and the infinite possibilities in the world we are creating. We break open the gates of the reservoirs of goodness and kindness in ourselves and in others as we reach toward one beautiful moment of Shabbat. I'd like to invite Jerry and Diana to please light our Shabbat candles.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor ba'shalom, ba'shalom, Baruch haor, Baruch haor b'Shabbat.
We gather on this Shabbat as a community of believers. We believe that Judaism is the entire experience of the Jewish people. We believe in the value of celebrating Jewish culture and identity. We believe that all those who choose to celebrate with us are part of our community. We believe that being together strengthens and enhances our humanistic Jewish experience. May this Shabbat be a time of peace and rejuvenation. This is a time of transition. We move from our everyday week to the experience of Shabbat. We turn from the concerns of the outside world and become quiet and peaceful. We, at this moment, in this time, create a community of humanistic Jewish believers. Let us pause and take note as we begin the journey of this Shabbat.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, bnei Shabbat nekabla. 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 Likrat Shabbat lichuv nelcha, ki et habracha hi mevia besimcha berena zohola, bnei Shabbat nekabla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, bnei Shabbat nekabla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, bnei Shabbat nekabla.
May we have the wit to speak the lean and simple word, the strength to speak the found word, the meant word, the humility to speak the friendly word, the answering word. Let us be sensitive to the sound of the words which others speak, sensitive to the sound of their words and to the silences between. That's not easy.
Mi haish hechafetz chaim, ohev yamim lirot tov. Mi haish hechafetz chaim, ohev yamim lirot tov. Netzor lashon chamera usvat midaber mirma, tur merav aseh tov bakesh shalom berot vehu. Netzor lashon chamerat usvatecha midaber mirma, sur merav aseh tov bakesh shalom berot vehu. Mi haish hechafetz chaim, ohev yamim lirot tov.
Loving life in its mystery, with all my heart and all my spirit, with all my senses and all my strength, I take upon myself these promises: to care for the earth and all who live on it, to pursue justice and peace, to love kindness and compassion. I will teach these to my children throughout the day, as I dwell in my home and as I go on my journey, from the time I rise up until I fall asleep.
Ori bi, evo tikvati bi, evo kochi bi, vegam ba, Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you.
Don't merely expect to find or to believe that life is worthwhile. Make it worthwhile. Not knowing which should come first, to improve oneself and to improve the world, we end up doing neither. Actually, the only way to improve the world is by improving oneself. And the only way to improve oneself is by improving the world.
נפתח לנו שערי צדק, חן וחסד ברחמים. נפתח לנו שערי צדק, חן וחסד ברחמים. אלה שערים לשלום, נפתח לנו ונבוא בם. אלה שערים לשלום, נפתח לנו ונבוא בם. נפתח לנו שערי צדק, חן וחסד ורחמים. נפתח לנו שערי צדק, חן וחסד ורחמים.
And then all that has divided us will merge. And then compassion will be wedded to power. And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind. And then all will be gentle. And then all will be strong. And then no person will be subject to another's will. And then all will be rich and free and varied. And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many. And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance. And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old. And then all will nourish the young. And then all will cherish life's creatures. And then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth. And then everywhere will be called Eden once again.
נעשה שלום, שלום בעולם, נעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל העולם, ואמרו שלום. נעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל העולם, ואמרו שלום. נעשה שלום, שלום בעולם. Shalom.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, and those who have been wronged. Tonight we extend our well wishes to these beloved members of our congregation, to Dr. Saul Foreman and to Carolyn Lowe. And I invite you, if you're thinking about anybody who you'd like to share, we'll go around the room. Anybody here? Over here, anybody? Okay, well that's good news. And also the news about Saul is that his procedure went well, and hopefully Carolyn's will as well. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly, and may they experience a complete recovery, or refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. At darker times in Jewish history, there were moments that came at this point in Jewish services when prayers were offered for those held hostage. To redeem captives was considered an essential mitzvah. Sadly, we once again find ourselves in such a reality. In the spirit of our ancestors who lived through those terrible days, we voice these fervent hopes. May those taken captive find the courage to carry on. May those who love them not despair of their return. May they soon emerge from their confinement whole in body and in spirit, to know once again the embrace of loved ones. And just before we continue, I want to mention that the Michigan Board of Rabbis will be holding a memorial and a commemoration of October 7th on that date. The location is yet to be announced, but probably you've received information in your email, and we'll have something in the newsletter. They didn't get it to us in time. I'm sure it'll be leaning towards the more religious kind of thing, but in solidarity, it's something I'm going to recommend, since I too am a member of the Michigan Board of Rabbis. We'll continue with our Makom HaKoach.
מקום הכוח בתוכנו, מקורות הברכה מעברותינו. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Shalom. Mekom HaKoach betochenu, Mekorot HaBracha mi'evrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. In memoriam. 'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, to hope, to dream, to be, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools this, and a sacred thing to love, for your life has lived in me. Your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a sacred thing, to love what death has touched.
Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, we observe the yard sites of these members of our community and their loved ones, of Sidney Bowman, Alan Freund, Mary Claridge, Sam Lieberman, William Morris, David Silverstein, Donald Sugarman, Robert Voigt, and Jamie Winchell. We also remember with love a woman who died just a couple of weeks ago, Noreen Zimmer, whose memorial will be observed online on Monday. An announcement was sent out. I'm going to say the time wrong. I think it's 11, though. And, of course, everybody is welcome to join us. If you have someone whom you're thinking about now, whom you've lost and loved, please feel free to share their names. Anybody on this side? No? On the other side? Okay. We say Yehi Zichram Livracha. And by this, of course, what we remember is that they are not gone from us when they live on in our hearts, that their memories are there, and their memories can still bless us. If you can do so comfortably, please rise as together we recite our interpretation of Kaddish. Nitgadal v'nitkadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us, each in our own way, take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. Audrey, do you want to make a follow-up announcement to what's going on, what we're still working on?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Yes. Tomorrow we'll be doing letter writing, postcard writing 3 times this week. Tomorrow, which is Saturday, 1 to 3, Monday, 1 to 3, Wednesday, 6 to 8. And we're going the second thing is walk against hate team on September 29th. There will also be a table to do great voter registration there too. So we like to have lots of team members, and we don't donate any money to show support for this cause. And of course, we are collecting goods for the Oakland County Foster Father. It's a good way also to honor the memory of any more questions about any of this, please ask us.
Thank you. You can hear I'm kind of soft-spoken tonight because I lost my voice. I think some of you know why I lost my voice. I was screaming very, very loud last Saturday. There were 100 and some odd thousand people who thought they were screaming louder than me and my friends, but it didn't avail them at all. So all I will say is, hook 'em horns. In any case, I prepared a much shorter talk tonight because I went way too long last week, and it's on a much narrower topic. I want to talk tonight actually about an article I read recently, and I'm going to start doing this a little bit more often. Suzanne Paul once suggested to me, you could, find a good article, talk about that, and I always have more fun doing that. This is an article by a man named Joe Chuman. I'll tell you more about him in a minute, but first let me introduce the topic. What we're going to talk about tonight is a certain tension that I think that anybody who has studied American history is definitely aware of. There are 2 things I think we can agree upon when it comes to our founding. One, the country was founded by people like Thomas Jefferson and many others of his type who viewed it as a product or maybe even the pinnacle of many of the Enlightenment ideals. And 2, since America's earliest European settlers, yet others among our founders, our nation has also been felt to have been established by people who held on to an idea that probably was brought here by the Puritans, the idea that America is or should be guided by religious faith. I said that a little bit awkwardly. But on one hand, we have the Enlightenment with its principles of democracy, of reason, and so forth. On the other, religious faith. And anyone who has studied the Enlightenment and religion knows that while there are some compatible elements between the two, depending on what kind of approaches we're talking about to either the Enlightenment or religious faith, there's also been quite a lot of tensions that Americans have been working out amongst ourselves with more and sometimes very much less success. I would argue recently less success for several centuries now. Among the thinkers who have been trying to work out these tensions, analyzing the history and the impact of these ideas on our political and social culture, are two people that I'm going to talk about tonight, one critiquing the other. So the first one is somebody who's undoubtedly well known to you, David Brooks, the famous New York Times columnist. I frequently find myself agreeing with him on certain things and frequently in great disagreement with him, and sometimes somewhere in between, which is also the mark of somebody who is, I think in his case, a very independent thinker. The other one that we're going to talk about tonight is a man I've only recently become acquainted with. I don't know him well, but I've been reading his work for probably the last couple of years. His name is Joe Chuman. He is a professor of human rights at Columbia University and at Hunter College in New York. And he is a leader of the New York Society for Ethical Culture. If you recall, ethical culture is sort of a sister religion, if you will, to humanistic Judaism. In fact, it was founded by the son of a rabbi, of a Reform rabbi, way back in the day, and this is its largest chapter. So in order to keep the conversation tonight more straightforward, I'm going to rely upon this article written by Professor Chuman to both help me in expressing what he said, of course, but also to summarize David Brooks. But you can find the article that David Brooks wrote, because it wasn't that long ago. It was in the New York Times, July 11th. I believe it was called The Deep Source of Trump's Appeal. But we're not talking about anything that has to do with Trump tonight. That's not the topic. The topic has to do with what they saw, both of them see, as sort of the trajectory of our country and what the answer might be. David Brooks is going to offer a solution that we may not agree with, but we may agree with some of it. Dr. Chuman, he provides something that represents the humanism that, of course, is so much a part of ethical culture. It is a religion, if you will. They call themselves a religion, a philosophy that is grounded in our approach to secular humanism. Professor Chuman published his thoughts, and you can read these and other articles of his in his Substack blog. And if you don't know what Substack is, you should. It's a wonderful place where serious people blog, thinkers, politicians sometimes. In fact, it hosts a whole newspaper there, and more probably are coming, called the Free Press. I've mentioned it before. It's not our Free Press. It's a different Free Press, one that I like to read. It's very provocative. The name of his Substack blog, if you're looking for it, you can just probably Google Chuman, C-H-U-M-A-N, and look for Beyond Appearances, and there you'll find it. His article that I'm going to talk about is called We Need to Rediscover an Enchantment with Enlightenment Ideals. He probably had a pithier title for it when he gave it as a speech. So let me try to summarize Brooks's argument as Dr. Chuman did, because I think he did a better job. I tried to do it myself, but I kept going back to his much better summation. So here's what he says about Brooks's article. In the opinion piece published in the New York Times, David Brooks probes the deeper sources of the divisions that plague us. And that's where the title that the New York Times chose came from. But it really wasn't about, as I say, specifically this campaign. It is his view, Brooks's view, that almost since the founding of the United States, there has been a tension between the values of the Enlightenment and what he calls the binding power of religion. Now note, I say there's a tension too, but I don't believe that there's a binding power of religion. And that, by the way, is going to be the fulcrum on which this argument teeters. The Enlightenment, Chuman writes, which emerged at the time of the scientific revolution, ushered in, as we all know, the modern world and many values associated with democracy, Among them are the universality of reason, of equality, of freedom, of dignity for all, and the requirement of deliberation as expressed in democratic forms of governance and neutral institutions like courts, I add, that promote fairness. As it is stated by Brooks, these values have existed alongside religion, which has served as a foundation of unifying society. As such, religion has served the basis for shared moral authority. I think so far Dr. Chuman has done a good job of taking some very, very long ideas that Brooks puts out there and condensing them. Brooks, he writes, contends that this tension existed until the 1960s, at which time people started abandoning the churches in significant numbers, and religion greatly lost its hold as the United States moved toward a more secular society. Brooks argues that the loss of a religious foundation led America to become morally diffuse. And Brooks contends that reason and science could not provide what only religion could do. The result of this, of course, Brooks would argue this, has been the prevalence of moral relativism, veering toward nihilism, which sort of widespread cynicism, I guess, would be the best way to understand that. Brooks further contends that for the past several decades, identity politics emerged to fill the moral vacuum. Identifying with one's group, ethnic, religious, political, became a powerful source of personal meaning. Identity politics, Brooks contends, has fueled the struggle among disparate groups for their share of the pie. But Brooks also points out in this intergroup conflict, overarching values and visions of a more just and unified society have been abandoned. The dynamics fueling overt power struggles between different camps, well, that's what opened the door, according to Brooks, to authoritarianism. Okay, well, let me first say something, and Chuman agrees about identity politics. I actually believe that identity politics can be problematic. And it is true that there are many groups seeking a piece of the pie with whom it started, but it didn't come to fill some great gap. It came because people are seeking ways to find themselves in American society and to be recognized and known. And by the way, though it has primarily been a phenomenon of the left, in some of its more, I would argue, damaging forms, we've seen it on the right. Let's not forget that the evangelical Christian camp in this country has become one of the most prominent identitarian groups in our country. So it's got a good side and it's got a bad side, but it's certainly not what came to fill it whole. In and of itself was an important idea, something that we as Jews should understand because our identities have been important to us, but also one that can be abused, whether for good or for bad. And I spoke about that last week at pretty much too much length when I talked about some of the excesses of woke ideology. So I won't return to that. You can consult that. Chuman continues his summary and explains that David Brooks hopes for the restoration of religious values as necessary for the healing of society and the saving of democracy. And it's with that sentence alone that you've undoubtedly figured out why I wanted to talk about this tonight. Professor Chuman goes on to point out what every single humanist, every student of religion for that matter, should already know. The question that hovers over all of this: what religion is David Brooks talking about? He answers it this way, Chuman does. Brooks's hope for religious renewal in America overlooks the reality that religion is an abstraction. There is no religion. There are multitudes of religions, each of them espousing different beliefs, promoting different ways of life. The call for more religion, whether coming from Christian nationalists, white evangelical Christians, or David Brooks, Chuman says, ironically comes at a time when America is becoming more religiously pluralistic. We've got growing sectors of Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims and Jews, increasing numbers of those professing their personal beliefs as being spiritual and not religious. And then let's not forget the atheists and the agnostics and all the crossovers. Any atheist Jew should remind us. Religion Chuman points out, is a diversifying, not a unifying force. The religions will never provide the moral coherence that Brooks advocates, and I could not agree more. Moreover, and I would point out that not only religion is at its best, I suppose, diversifying, at its worst, it's divisive. You can look at it both ways. Professor Chuman made another good point in this article. More significantly, he writes, the appeal of religion has often been a piece with a grassroots blood and soil populism that partakes of authoritarian sensibilities and values. If you're unfamiliar with the term blood and soil populism, think Nazi Germany and other nationalist ideologies that link a nation's identity to their ethnic heritage and soil, while at the same time opposing rights and privileges for anyone else who are not considered native or conquerors of the homeland. And also please understand that not every nation with an ethnic attachment to land is necessarily engaging in blood and soil populism. Certainly, and I think even the most secular of secular humanists can agree with Chuman when he says that religion can and has been a good thing when it's at its best. Religion, when it's at its best, he says, has been a purveyor of progressive values. However, as he reminds us, most often, it's been a conservative influence that all too easily has morphed into an ally of the darkest political forces, fascism among them. Religion is not often divorced from its authoritarian propensities. And while many of us, because we grew up in liberal Judaism or in a similar liberal milieu or left a milieu to come into liberal religion, think about, the nice progressive religions, we have to also remember that most religions on the earth are highly authoritarian. They're built upon that. Somebody recently asked me, who is the Pope of the Jews? And I said, all the Jews are the Pope of the Jews. Chuman writes, we summon religion at our peril. Going on to point out that faith in democracy has historically been rooted in religion, but in the has historically not been rooted in religion, but in the uplifting vision of America as the engine of the new, the creative, the different, the just, and humane. In other words, the values of the Enlightenment, which Professor Chuman, like myself, credits as the real underpinning of democracy. Let's talk for a moment about the Enlightenment and the birth of modern secular democracy. I think there's a good argument to be made that we may not be the first democracy on the planet. I like to give a little bit of a credit to the United Kingdom. However, I think we can all agree that we are the first democratic republic, that we are the first secular democracy, at least in our hopes, and we are the first nation founded explicitly on democratic aspirations, though it took, obviously, some centuries, and still working at it, to get to all of our aspirations. This is the United States. This is the country that we care for, that we live in, that we want to make its best. Consider these central values of the Enlightenment that Professor Chuman enumerates that are in some ways wholly responsible for what we value as American. Reason and rationality, the belief that human beings can solve problems in our society, that in a sense, only we can do it. Equality and individual rights, the idea that all people are equal before the law, that we all have inherent rights. It's there, obviously aspirationally, not having yet been achieved, but in the words of the Declaration of Independence. Democracy, governance by the people based on deliberation and our consent, we the people. These are the values that shaped the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And ultimately, it should be noted, democratic governance in Europe, although that took a lot more war and trouble before they finally got there. Certainly, religion has been in tension with the Enlightenment, but I would argue that it's mostly lost the battles because of its essential authoritarianism and the way that it's always been in tension with the Enlightenment's promise of freedom. When Brooks and others call for more religion as a unifying moral force in America, not only do they misunderstand the nature of religion and all the things I've already mentioned, but they also fail to acknowledge that it's already making another comeback, and it's not a good one. Through the fusion of Christian identity with American nationalism, Christian nationalism is already on the rise, promoting an exclusionary and authoritarian agenda. Just consider the ways that it has galvanized support for authoritarian populism. The influence of religious ideology is not doing anything like what David Brooks promises us, certainly not providing moral ballast in America. It's not being wielded in a way akin to one of the examples he gives of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, that was a man who knew how to fuse a certain religious idea or set of ideals with that which was best in the Enlightenment, as he fought that which was indecent and truly evil. He did not do this to undo the best accomplishments of the modern standard bearers of the Enlightenment. He didn't do this to take us backwards. He didn't do this to undo equality and individual rights. He did this because he believed in the promise of the Enlightenment, and he believed, as Reformed Jews have, that this was part of the religious promise as well. If everyone who was religious believed that, I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now. But they're not, and they won't be, because it's never happened in the history of religion. And so what does Professor Chuman recommend? He recommends a different kind of religious awakening. He doesn't call it that, but I'll characterize that. He asks that we rediscover the enchantment, an almost religious word, in Enlightenment ideals. That it is a competitor for the enchantment of religion. And it's with that I want to conclude. You've never heard me conclude so fast before, have you? I'm getting better at this, guys. By the time I retire, I will be giving much, much shorter. I'll just come up here and say, humanism, and I'll sit down. He actually brings forward something that I found very inspiring, and I looked up this book and read a little bit of it, called Achieving Our Country, written by a man named Richard Rorty. At least one person in the congregation is familiar with it, but that's okay. I'm going to share the part that inspired me to pick it up. In that book, Rorty invokes two very famous Americans, Walt Whitman and the philosopher John Dewey, calling them paragons of American democracy. Walt Whitman, as I believe most of you will know, was the great 19th century American poet. He's probably best known for the work that I hope all had to study at some point in college, Leaves of Grass, which celebrated democracy and nature and the human spirit, and whose work had such a major influence on American literature, all kinds of literature and poetry. He believed that democracy is a project of love and solidarity among individuals. That's almost a quasi-religious way of thinking about it. Certainly a romantic way of putting it. And then there was John Dewey, and many of you may have heard of him as well. He is not the guy who did the Dewey Decimal System. That was Melville Dewey. Arthur will always remind me to tell you that. He's a librarian, for those of you who don't know. Dewey lived a very long life from the mid-18th to the mid-19th century, was a hero to Rabbi Wein. He wrote about him many times. The American philosopher and educator who promoted progressive education and pragmatism, which is a big part of democracy, and whose ideas significantly shaped modern educational practices and democratic theory. He taught that democracy truly grounds us in a kind of shared intelligence, a communal action. And here's what Richard Rorty, the author of that book, wrote about these two men. Whitman and Dewey were among the prophets of civic religion. They offered a new account of what America was in the hope of mobilizing Americans as political agents. The most striking feature of their redescription of our country is its thoroughgoing secularism. Both viewed the United States as an opportunity to see ultimate significance in a finite human historical project rather than in something eternal and non-human. They wanted the struggle for social justice to be the country's animating principle, the nation's soul. I'm so grateful to Professor Joe Chuman for introducing me to this book through that quote. Professor Chuman points out in his piece that it is the belief in social progress conjoined with the liberating potential of democracy that has been lost and needs to be restored. That's what we should be focusing on. Both Whitman and Dewey, he says, extolled the individual, and that's important. But Whitman saw the individual conjoined with others through love, and Dewey as an expression of our intrinsic social nature. Is this not ephoria? Right? In me, our strength, and in you? For Dewey especially, democracy is the lifestyle of a free people. He believed that through the shared use of intelligence, we can change reality and remake American society for the better. The thought of Whitman and Dewey frame an inspiring democratic vision of American society that can guide us as we move into the future. True, Chuman writes, democracy is messy. Authoritarianism reduces truth to simple slogans that effectively arouse the baser passions, and therein lies its motivating power. But liberal democracy holds the basis of enchantment also. With its espousal of personal dignity comes a sense of elegance. Its defense of individualism and autonomy speaks to the liberation of personal power and creativity. Its defense of rights is empowering in the face of oppression. In its demand, he says, for cooperation and communal action, it reinforces human solidarity. In its commitment to ideals, it lifts the spirit. It takes us beyond ourselves and inspires us to what we can be. Now, Professor Chuman does not deny the power of group identities, as I said earlier, and these, I believe, and this may be obvious for someone as Jewish as I am, are essential to the human experience. We need to remember that we're also parts of groups and to express ourselves that way collectively. But I love the way he argues, and this is where I'll conclude, with for a broader vision, writing that American democracy can be seen as an expansive project in which the distinctive contributions of each group and each person can serve the enrichment of all. Such a vision can inspire us to reclaim the promise and wisdom of democracy and recommit us to work with our fellow Americans toward creating a more just and perfect union. He concludes by saying, if we can safely get beyond the dark forces of the current political moment, an inspired view of American democracy and its possibilities can lead us to a much brighter horizons. And I couldn't agree more. I'm very, very grateful to have had the opportunity to study him, and I may be inviting him to speak someday. I'm going to let him know I talked about him, and I don't know if anybody has a contact, let me know. That's where I'll conclude tonight, and so you didn't expect to have to get up so soon, but when I said I was going to be short, I wasn't lying. Also, the last wisps of my voice are gone. Joseph, please sing for us.
What? I'll sing if everybody sings. May we know peace as we go on our way. May we be guided by love. May we be blessed with health and joy. May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. May we we be sheltered by the wings of peace. May we abide in safety and in love. May grace and compassion find their way to everyone. May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you to David for the streaming, Arthur for the slides, and to all of you, Shabbat Shalom.